Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Boss Up and Glow Up with Alexi Sample. I'm your host, and I give you the most cutthroat best friend advice that I can possibly give. We don't sugarcoat anything, we don't water shit down. We are absolutely 110% truthful and honest. We don't play games with each other around here because that's not what a friendship is. We're friends here. We tell the full truth. And this is a sit down, let's actually get shit done zone. And if you're new here, welcome. You found your people. And if you've been hanging out with me for a while, you already know how we do it. We come in, we get real, we get into it, we get deep, and we leave even better than we came in. And that is the whole point of this every single episode. And today's episode is one I have genuinely been wanting to do for a while now. Like, this has been sitting in my notes app, marinating and waiting for the right moment. And I think the right moment is today. So, here is what brought this topic to the front of my mind. And I kept hearing the words, not just once, not just twice, but many fucking times in conversations, in affirmations people were sharing, and just out in the world in general. And that word was unbothered. And listen, I love the concept of being unbothered. I love the intention behind it. I love what we are collectively trying to reach when we use that word, but we need a very real and very direct conversation about what unbothered actually means in practice versus what most of us are genuinely doing when we say it. Because I think there is a massive gap between the two. The gap is where a lot of us are quietly struggling and not even realizing it. So here's the truth I want to open with today. And the truth is that nobody really wants to say it out loud is most of us are not unbothered. Most of us are just exhausted from pretending. And I need you to sit with that for a second because those are two fundamentally completely different things. Not the same energy. They do not feel the same. They do not produce the same results in your life. And I think a lot of us have been confusing one for the other for a very long time. And by the time we're done here, I want you to understand the real difference between those two things. I want you to honestly just audit where you actually fall on that spectrum right now. And I want you to walk away with something genuinely practical that you can apply to real life. It's not an aesthetic, not just a good feeling, something you can actually do and practice. All right, let's dive into it. All right, so let's start by really defining what we're talking about here because I think the first step is painting a clear and true picture so we can all recognize ourselves in this situation, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable. Let me describe something for you. This is a woman who genuinely believes she doesn't care what people think. She will tell anyone who asks. She has decided that she is past the point of being affected by other people's opinions, and she carries herself with that energy. She presents herself with that energy, and in many ways, she has built an entire identity around it. But if you actually follow her throughout the week, here's what you would see. Someone who makes a comment about a decision she made. Maybe it's a family member at dinner, maybe it's a coworker in a meeting, or maybe it's a friend who said something just a little too casually and then she smiles. She brushes it off. She says nothing in the moment, and then when she gets home, she replays it word for word, tone and everything. What she could have said, or she brought it up to at least two other people, and not because she cares, obviously, because she doesn't give a fuck. She just thought it was worth mentioning. She's still thinking about it at 1 a.m. when she should be sound asleep. Does that sound familiar? Because it should. Because I have been that woman, and I would be willing to bet that most of the people listening to this right now have been that person too at some point, maybe even recently. And here's what I want to be really clear about. I'm not telling this story to make anybody feel like shit or to feel bad about themselves. I'm telling it because I truly think we need to call it for what it is before we can actually change it. What that woman is doing is not being unbothered. What that woman is doing is suppressing, and suppression and peace are not even remotely the same thing. We latched onto this word unbothered because it genuinely sounds like freedom. It sounds like you have done the work, arrived at some elevated level, and now you just float above all the things that used to knock you the fuck down. And that is a beautiful, gorgeous vision, and I want that for all of us, truly. But a lot of us have skipped the process and just grabbed the label of being unbothered, and that does not work. That is like deciding you're a morning person and setting 5 alarms and then sleeping through all of them and wondering why your mornings still feel chaotic. Do you see what I'm saying here? that decision alone doesn't make it real. The work is what makes it real. And here's the part that I really want you to hear, because this is something that took me a while to fully understand. When we perform unbotheredness without actually building it, we don't become stronger. We become more fragile because now, on top of everything that's bothering us, we have this whole performance that we need to maintain. We can't even admit when something hit us. We can't be honest about it. We can't be honest about it. We have to keep that image intact, and the performance takes energy, real energy every single fucking day that you could be using actually healing. Performing unbothered is actually way more draining than just admitting you're bothered because when you admit it, you can deal with it. You can process it. You can move through it. Let it go. But when you perform it, you just carry it around quietly forever, just smiling at it, pretending it isn't heavy, while it just sits there in your chest, getting heavier and heavier. And eventually, something gives. It always fucking does. Okay, so now I want to tell y'all a story, and I am going to tell the story in detail because I want you to really be able to see yourself in it. Because I know that some version of this has happened to most of the people listening to this right now. A few years ago, I was part of a friend group, and I say I was because soon you'll understand that we have closed that book. We have moved on, but I am grateful for it because it taught me something really important. So, in that group, there was a girl. Should we give her a name? Let's call her Brianna, I guess. Sure, cool. Now, Brianna was one of those people who would always just joking. She was always just joking. Everything was a joke. Everything had a little edge to it, but it was fine because she was joking. Lighten up. Why are you so sensitive? It was just a joke. You know who I'm talking about. Every single one of you just pictured a face. There was always this person who would say things that isn't really funny, but she would say it's a joke. And Brianna had a specific habit of directing those jokes at me, like little comments and little digs, little observations that were just pointed out enough to sting, but casual enough that she could always walk them back if called out. And every single time she did it, every time, I would just, hee, I would wave it off. And afterwards, if anybody asked me about it, I would say without hesitation, oh, I don't give a fuck. I'm not even thinking about it. I'm unbothered. And y'all, I believed it. I genuinely believed in the moment that I was being the mature one, the bigger person, the emotionally evolved one who is simply too secure to be bothered by someone like Brianna. But here is a very honest and very detailed description of what was actually happening when I went home. I would replay that comment, those exact words. I would use her exact tone, the exact look on her face when she said it. And I would think about how I should have responded. I would literally craft the perfect response in the shower in my head, saying it out loud. The one that was sharp but unbothered, firm but kind of effortless in a sense, the kind of thing that would make everyone in the room quiet. I was writing, directing, and performing this imaginary confrontation that Brianna was never going to witness. And then, this is the part I'm almost embarrassed to admit, but I would bring it up casually, of course, to other people in the group. Oh, it's nothing. It's fine. I just thought it was a little weird and strange that she said that. Like, don't you think it was a little weird? And I was collecting opinions to gather some validation and building almost a case, all while maintaining the firm position that I did not give a fuck. Guys, that is not unbothered. That is not even close to unbothered. That is somebody who is absolutely, completely, 1,010% bothered, who has just committed a very hard story that says otherwise. That moment cracked it all open for me when one of my closest and most honest friends, and I genuinely love this woman for what she said to me, and she looked me in the eye and said, I need to ask you something. Why do you keep telling me you don't care about what Brianna says when she literally comes up in almost every conversation we have? I want you to sit in that silence for a second because that is the kind of thing that stops you in your tracks because she was right. She was so right. And I had been so focused on performing the image of not giving a fuck what Brianna said. I never once actually dealt with the fact that this person was making me feel small on a regular basis. And I just kept showing up. I kept smiling. I just kept swallowing it. And I packaged all of that, labeled it strength. And it was not strength, it was avoidance in a very, very convincing disguise. And here's the deeper thing, the thing that really shifted something in me is once I was honest enough to look at it, the reasons Brianna's comments stuck with me the way that it did, it wasn't just because she was rude. It was because she kept hitting spots that I was tender about. Like, she wasn't creating insecurities. She was finding the ones that I already had, and then she was kind of pressing on them. And as long as I was focused on performing unbothered toward Brianna, I never had to turn around and actually look at those insecurities and deal with them. And she was hitting targets that I actually drawn on myself. And the real work, the actual unbothered work, wasn't pretending her arrows just missed. It was going back and asking why those particular spots were so unprotected in the first place. That is a completely different conversation than I don't care what Brianna says. And it is a much more honest and more useful one. What does performing unbothered actually look like in real life? It looks like being in a meeting and having someone dismiss your idea, and then you just smile, hee hee it off, and say nothing. But for the rest of the day, your entire energy is off. Your mood is off. You're shorter with people. You can't focus. You're just stewing, and everyone around you can feel it, even though you haven't said a word. But everyone can pick up on that energy. And it looks like finding out that people in your life were talking about you, making assumptions about your choices, and instead of addressing it or genuinely releasing it, you store every single detail. And you know exactly who said what, you know exactly who told you what, and you are keeping all of that information somewhere in the back of your mind for a reason. You haven't even fully admitted it to yourself yet. It looks like saying, "Oh, I'm not even thinking about it," so many times, and with such conviction that you've almost started to believe it. Almost. But your body always knows the truth. Your sleep knows. Your appetite knows. Your energy when you walk into certain rooms even know. And it looks like hearing someone you used to be close with has been thriving and feeling something flicker in your chest, like something complicated, something that makes you feel a little ashamed. And immediately you just start covering it with, good for them. I genuinely don't give a fuck, because you don't want to sit with what that trigger actually was. Hmm. None of that is unbothered. All that's normal human behavior, but we have to call it for what it is. Now, what does practicing unbothered actually look like? It looks like someone saying something that stings and you feel it. You actually let yourself feel it in real time instead of immediately like armoring up. And then you make a deliberate, conscious, chosen decision about how much of your energy and how much of your time and your mental space that thing is going to receive. Not a reaction, a decision. And it looks like being able to say to yourself or even to someone else, that actually bothered me. That hurt. That landed in a way I didn't expect. And sitting with that honesty, figuring out what that's really about and releasing it with intention rather than just forcing it down the hatch and just hoping it stays there. It looks like your self worth being so genuinely rooted in who you are, in your own values, your own growth, your own story, that when someone else has an opinion about your life, your first instinct is curiosity rather than getting defensive. Like, you would say something maybe like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting in the way that they see that," instead of, "I need to prove them wrong immediately." It looks like not needing the last word, not needing to make sure everyone knows you're okay, not needing to perform your piece for an audience, just actually sitting with it, having it quietly and consistently. And I want to share something that I keep coming back to when I think about this topic. And I don't know exactly where I first heard this, but it really stuck with me. Maybe it was from a book or something, but it was, peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the absence of internal conflict. I want you to really let that sit, because what that means is that the goal was never a life where nothing goes wrong. where nobody challenges you or tests you or disappoints you, talks about you. That life does not exist. That there's no such thing at all. As long as you're alive on this earth and moving through the world and in relationships with other people, things are going to happen. The goal is to get to a place where these things happen, but there's no war inside of you, where you can be fully present in the chaos without the chaos taking up like permanent residence in your nervous system. And that is where we actually want to build towards. And that takes time, it takes practice and honesty, but it's absolutely available to you and it is possible. I feel like right here is where you may get defensive on me, but I want you to stay open because what I'm about to say is coming from a place of genuine love, and I mean every word of it. And some of these things I've done. So I'm kind of talking from experience as well, but some of us, and I am including past versions of myself in this fully, have been using Unbothered as an avoidance strategy. A very well branded and very well packaged avoidance strategy. And what I mean by that is sometimes when we say, I'm unbothered, what we are actually saying underneath is, I don't want to look at this. I don't want to have the conversation that this would require. I don't want to examine what this is actually triggering in me. So, you know what? I'm just going to skip it all and go straight to the part where I've moved on. And I understand the appeal. I really do. I've been there. And it's kind of a messy middle ground. And it's the part where you actually sit with something uncomfortable and turn it over and ask yourself hard questions about it. And that's not fun. Nobody is rushing to get to that part. Skipping it feels like the emotionally efficient choice. But here is what that skip will cost you. The things that we don't process, we carry. And we carry them whether we acknowledge them or not. They go into the body, they go into our relationships, they come out in moments that have nothing to do with the original thing. As a disproportionate reaction to something small, as a pattern you keep repeating and don't understand, as a wall that went up so you gradually didn't notice that it was there until someone pointed it out, and you never really let people in anymore. That's not a glow up. That is a grief that you never processed. It's a grief being unprocessed, and you're calling it healing. And I want to say something else that I think is really important, especially for people who grew up in environments where showing emotion was treated as weakness, where crying was something to be ashamed of, where being strong meant not letting things touch you. Feeling things is not weakness. Feeling things is the entry point to healing. You have to feel things. And I want you to think about the most emotionally resilient woman you know or person you know, the one who genuinely seems grounded and calm and unshakable. I would be willing to bet that those women are not people who feel nothing. They are people who have learned to fully feel things and process them and come out on the other side. And they didn't build that by shutting things down. They built it by going through it. The only way out is through, you guys. You are allowed to be hurt. You are allowed to be bothered. You are allowed to sit in that for a minute and actually feel it without immediately rushing to be over it. The goal is not to be emotionally numb. The goal is to feel everything and still choose your responses from a grounded place rather than a reactive one. And that is work. That is the work I'm talking about. And that is the kind of unbothered that actually lasts. Okay. I have one more story and I need to tell this one because I know my professional people, I'm composed and competent, but internally I am not okay, are going to feel this one in their bones. I had a manager once, let's call her Denise. Now, Denise was very good at one particular thing, stealing ideas that were not hers and presenting them as if they absolutely were. The process was almost elegant in how consistent it was. You would come into a meeting, you would share an idea, Denise would nod vaguely or not react at all. Meeting ends, everyone moves on. Then 2 weeks later, without fail, Denise would be in front of leadership, presenting your exact idea in your exact verbatim with complete and total ownership. Oh, that's annoying. First time it happened, I convinced myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was unbothered. I was a professional. These things happen. Move on, keep it pushing. Second time, I was not imagining it. I was significantly less unbothered. I still said nothing, still smiled, tea heated off, still showed up to the next thing or the next meeting the next day, and like everything was completely fine. Third time, I started a journal, specifically about Denise. Not a happy gratitude journal, no, a Denise journal. I was in the car having full blown, out loud conversations with a woman who could never hear me. I was building an elaborate mental case, collecting every instance, replaying every meeting. I was spending genuinely a significant amount of personal time that belonged to me and my peace, dedicated entirely to someone who was going home completely unbothered by me. Mhm. And that was the moment. That was the final thing that made me realize that I needed to stop and get honest with myself because I realized she was not thinking about me. She did not give a fuck about me. She is living her life. She is sleeping fine. And I'm over here writing a mental dissertation about this woman on a Tuesday evening when I should be resting. When you are truly unbothered by somebody, they do not occupy your personal time. They do not live in your car rides home. They do not interrupt your rest. If Denise was taking up that much space outside of my work, I was not unbothered by Denise. I was consumed by her and refusing to admit it. So I did the actual thing, the hard, uncomfortable, necessary thing. I asked for a meeting. I sat across from Denise. I was calm, professional, and completely clear when I said, when I contribute ideas, I expect to be credited for them. I want to make sure we're aligned on that going forward. And I'll be following up our meetings with written summaries so there's a clear record of what I said. Was that conversation comfortable? No. Did Denise receive it well? No, she did not. Did anything magically change overnight? Not completely. But I did walk out of that building feeling like I had given myself something that weeks of performing unbothered never gave me. Absolutely. I felt lighter. I felt clear. I felt like I had actually handled something instead of just kind of enduring it with a smile. And that is what real unbothered energy looks like. Not silence, not suppression, clarity, boundaries, the willingness to actually address it so it stops living inside you. We've done the real talk, we've done the stories, we've looked at some uncomfortable truths in the face together. Now, let me give you something concrete to take with you because that is what we do here. We do not just name the problem, we work through it. Here are 5 things that have genuinely, meaningfully helped me shift from performing this to actually practicing it. And one thing was feel it fully. When something bothers you, and something will bother you because you're human, don't just sit in the fog or I'm upset, I'm annoyed. Get specific. What is the actual thing and actual feeling underneath the surface? Is it embarrassment? Is it jealousy that you don't want to admit? Is it fear? Fear that maybe they're right? Or fear that you're not exactly where you want to be? Is it grief over something you expected that didn't happen? The reason specifically matters is that vague feelings are very much harder to process than full detailed ones. When you identify the exact emotion, it loses some of its power over you. You can look at it directly and fully. You can ask it what it needs. You can work with it instead of being dragged by it. Another thing is ask the harder question. What is this actually touching in me? This is the Brianna lesson applied practically. When you notice that a comment or a situation keeps coming back, no matter how many times you try to let it go, that persistence is information. It's almost always telling you that this thing is touched somewhere that was tender, something was sensitive, something you were already uncertain or insecure about. And that is not a criticism of you. That is actually incredibly useful data protecting you directly toward where your real healing work needs to happen. And the question to ask yourself is not just why did this bother me, but what does this what does the fact that it bothered me tell me about what I believe in myself? Ooh, that question is where the real work lives. A third one, give yourself a real defined reaction window and then close it. You're allowed to react. You're allowed to feel it completely and process it out loud. Give yourself a specific window, an hour, a day, maybe a weekend for something significant. Use that window fully. Talk to someone you trust, like a really good friend or a family member. Write it out and let yourself be in the feeling without judgment. And then When that window closes, you close it because there is a real difference between those two things. Suppression is forcing the feeling down and stacking things up on top of it. And redirection is acknowledging the feeling, giving it space, and then consciously choosing to bring your attention back to the present and to what is actually in your control. Every time your brain tries to circle back after the window is closed, you redirect. And that is not denial. That is one of the most powerful emotional skills you can build. 4. Stop narrating your piece to other people. I am going to say this with so much love. If you find yourself frequently telling people that you're unbothered, that you don't care, that something didn't affect you, start paying attention to that impulse because the person who has genuinely done the work doesn't need to announce it. They don't need witnesses to their healing. The piece they have is self-validating. It doesn't require an audience. You don't have to defend your piece and you don't have to perform it for anybody. You just have to protect it. And sometimes protecting it means just being honest with yourself about when it isn't actually there yet. So you can do what it actually takes to build it. 5. Build something that is bigger and louder than the noise. And this is the one that I want to end on because I think it is the most important and the most overlooked. A huge part of why people's opinions carry so much weight is because we are not always fully anchored in our own. When you are genuinely, actively, passionately building something, your purpose, your goals, your creativity, your relationships, your joy, that thing generates its own energy. It creates gravity and it naturally pulls your attention inward and forward. When your own life is loud enough and full enough and meaningful enough to you, the outside noise gets smaller. Not because you forced it out, not because you're kind of training yourself to tune it out, but because you genuinely have somewhere better to put your attention. Something worth more to you than what somebody else thinks. And that is the foundation that makes everything else possible. And it is something you can build if you just start right now. Okay, y'all. Let's wrap this up a little bit because I went on a little tangent here, but I want to make sure you leave today with a full picture of what this looks like. Unbothered is real. It is possible. It is something that genuinely is completely available to you. And I believe with everything in me, but it's not a label. It's not a caption. It's not a personality trait. It's not a decision that you make once and then just receive it automatically. It's a practice. It is daily emotional work that happens in quiet and peace and in the moments with yourself, in the hard conversations you stop avoiding, in the spaces where you choose to feel something instead of putting on that performance past it. The goal was never to be a person who feels nothing. The goal was to never be untouchable or closed off or numb. The goal was to be a person who feels everything, who doesn't run from the hard stuff, who is still, at the end of the day, chooses their responses from a place of groundness rather than reaction. You need to feel it, name it, sit with it, and ask it what it's really about. Process it fully, and then make a choice about what you do next that is rooted in who you actually are and what you actually want for your life. And that is power. That is the real thing, and that is what we're building towards. You are not required to perform peace. You are invited to build it. And if today's episode gave you something, even one little thing that you're going to carry with you, please go share it with somebody who needs to hear it, a friend, a sibling, or somebody in your life you know is performing instead of practicing it. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Boss Up and Glow Up. I hope this made you realize that being unbothered isn't a personality trait. This is something you actually have to work towards, okay? I hope this helped you out, and I want to thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.